Hi, this is Weird Christian, and I search for truth. But on this day, I'm going to talk first about a couple experiences that I had about conversation, and then I'm going to go into a talk about conversation. And I was at a Stampede breakfast. As you can see, I got a cowboy hat here. And that's in Calgary. They have the Stampede in Calgary. And a person did, actually a native, did a Aboriginal acknowledgement before the breakfast. And I found that interesting. So I wanted to talk to the woman and just see what she had to say about different things. So I'm not really thrilled with land acknowledgements because I see them as, I don't, the whole idea of it that's being promoted is to destroy land ownership. And it's happened in BC where they've been doing land acknowledgements, and now people that have paid taxes on land are now finding out that they don't own the land anymore. It's natives own it instead. But that's a very complicated thing anyway. In Canada, really all land is owned by the Crown. But anyway, I just wanted to talk to her about it, and I thought that it might become, it could turn into a fight and an argument and so forth. I didn't want to have that. I just want to have a conversation. So I really believe, I'm a Christian, and I believe that there is power in prayer. I've seen things happen from praying to God. And one of the things is I believe that God is a spirit, and he can bring peace and allow it so that people can have, conversations rather than just yelling and screaming at each other like they're filled with demons. Anyway, so I prayed to my God and asked him to bring peace, and just so we could have conversation and give me the words to talk to this woman so that we can have a good conversation. And I did that, and then I went when it was time, when it was available. And she, she'd done her thing and all that. I went over to her and asked her, about what she thought about, treaties and stuff like that. And so she told me, and then we had a bit of a conversation, and it was a very good conversation. Her name was Chantal. She was a Cree. She had a beautiful voice for singing and everything, and it was a very positive conversation. And I told her about a person that the Shanties that, they do drum circle. She does, Johnny does drum circles. So I told her, hey, get in contact with Johnny, and I'm sure you guys would be having a great time together. I always have a great time with them. So that was a very positive conversation. But I was there with, my wife line dances, and there's a fellow in there that I've always had great conversations with, and, we have fun with it. But I was wearing my Alberta shirt, Alberta Strong shirt, and so after he did his performance, he beelined over to me. He says, I don't agree with you. And I said, well, yeah, well, and then he rattled off his, a bunch of things that could talk about, and, and so forth. And I said, well, we should get together and have a conversation. He says, I don't have to listen to you. And he ran off. And so there you go. You have another conversation. And I didn't press the moment. And that's another thing, if somebody's not willing to talk, then you shouldn't go after them and force a conversation or win an argument. There's no point. You're not going to win any arguments. You can present some ideas, and they can present ideas, and then they have to decide for themselves whether it's any good, right? So that was an experience. And now I'm going to talk about how to have a conversation with another person over, topics that are hard to talk about without having fights and arguments. And you don't get anywhere with fights and arguments. So if you're having problems with that, I really want to share this with you. Maybe you can learn a few things about how to not have an argument, because it's really, a big issue in today's world. Everybody, they have a conversation and they got to win an argument. That's not the point of it. So I'm just going to have a little sheet here that I wrote up. And just a sec here. I should have got rid of this here. And there we go. So now I'm going to have to do maybe this here. There we go. Yeah. So how can we talk to those who think differently from us? We need to be humble to listen. We should not believe that we need to win over those who think differently with arguments. Let them speak. Attempt to understand them. Repeat back what you heard from them in your own words. This does not mean that you agree. It only means that you are listening. You will find that in repeating what you thought you heard, you usually misunderstand. Communication is not easy. And like for Chantal, she was a Cree native, and, we talked about residential schools. Oh, no, we did talk about residential schools, but we talked about treaties. And I came at it for finding solutions to issues that she was having rather than trying to, and also to realize potential problems that might happen and help her in dealing with the treaties in her mind and with other people. So you're not trying to be a person that's arguing. You should be trying to help them in solutions to issues that can cause and happen. So, like for one thing, like she was saying, I'm just going to bring another example. She was saying that the natives were traumatized and the words didn't mean what they meant. And I said, in all agreements, people are traumatized. And if you use that as an excuse for the words or whatever, the treaty, then and try to redefine words in the treaty because of that, then you're really destroying words and language. Rather than do that, because every agreement, there's always somebody that says they're traumatized. I've been traumatized several times, in some agreements. People get traumatized all the time, but that's not a reason to break an agreement. If it is an agreement that is that doesn't seem to be fair and it's not getting the results that you want, just say that was a bad agreement. Let's do a new agreement. And then just start a new agreement. Just say that the last one was bad and we don't like it anymore. We're going to get a new one. Rather than redefining words in the old agreement. Just say it was not very good. That is the more proper way. Because if you don't honor words, pretty soon people start getting fisticuffs when they can't. You're not listening and you don't really want to talk. So it's better to just say, hey, those words weren't good. Let's do a new agreement. And I said for treaties, that's what they should do. Or new understanding of it. There's a lot of things involved with treaties. I'm not going to talk about it here, but that's how, otherwise you're destroying the language when you start redefining words, and that's not very good. It just makes people more confused and get frustrated and so forth. Anyway, communication is not easy. Once they realize that you are really attempting to listen to them, they might become gracious and listen to what you have to say. This is called having a conversation. When people have this type of conversation, they learn to understand others' perspectives. Doesn't mean they agree with them, but they learn to understand them. Okay? People avoid those who understand things differently. Subjects like religion and politics can turn into arguments and fights. We form cliques so we can have peace. But now people are sticking their noses into our space. And yeah, and some people and some friends we know are thinking differently about these subjects. Like that's an example of, a friend that I knew in line dancing, and he had a different idea about the subject. We all become upset because we believe that others are uninformed and not as smart as us. And he thought I was uninformed and maybe not as smart as him. I don't know. I know he's smart. I think, I said, people are not really, informed about it. They have different ideas that they really don't, so it's something to learn about. That's why you have a conversation. Yet in life, we cannot avoid these topics, and we need to know how to talk to others without getting frustrated. Jesus states, and this is going to be different than what you really heard, okay? Jesus states that we need a new way to communicate with others. In the Beatitudes, Jesus states that the poor in spirit are blessed, for they will receive the kingdom of heaven. In God's kingdom, conversation is edifying because people have the right attitude when talking about divisive subjects. Think about that. Conversation is edifying because people have the right attitude when talking about divisive subjects. The attitude is to be poor in spirit. This is what it means. One needs to be humble and listen. That was what it means, poor in spirit. You need to be able to listen. When one is willing to listen, they can learn new paradigms to understand true reality. If the person you're listening to doesn't want to give you a chance to speak, don't expect to have a conversation with them. Don't try to win over an argument. Just politely say thank you for your time, but I have other things to do. Or just let them walk off. And don't try to run after them. Just let them have their space. With conversations, we can learn. Sometimes we have to ask questions to understand another. And during conversations, new ideas may appear that were not even considered in either party. I've had that happen. Conversations may cause us to realize that we do not know, that we must search more and deeper to understand. Many of us do not know why we do what we do or think what we think. I'll repeat that. Many of us do not know why we do what we do or think what we think. I found that many times. We all journey through this world based on our assumptions. To know who we are, we need to have conversations to find the axioms we live by. And an axiom is basically a fundamental belief or idea that we live by. Many of us don't really know about these things because you have to ask questions and have conversations. And in this world, we tend to not be having conversations. In fact, conversations are discouraged because they say it's hate speech or something. And it can be hate speech because it can turn into arguments and fights. Okay, you don't want that. These conversations need to question what we believe. We need fruitful conversations. This can only happen when we have a common goal and some common understanding. Without these conversations, we will end up in condemnation rather than edification. In ancient Greece, Socrates sought to engage in productive conversations. He did this by asking questions and teaching others to do so. The powerful in society did not share Socrates' common goal. And his common goal was to find the best axioms to improve society. They were afraid of losing authority. And they were also afraid that the society could go into chaos. People are afraid. Socrates was questioning the social order, and as such, they stated he was acting seditiously against the establishment. The people who were the establishment justified their declared death sentence for Socrates by having him commit suicide. Socrates questioned to understand. His motives were not to destroy the social order. He wanted to make society more robust and prosperous. This can only happen when the fundamentals of society's relationships are questioned. Questioning exposes the core. Communicating is difficult. Some consider asking questions a sin, which is what happened why Socrates had to kill himself, because it was considered a sin, basically. Questioning the given order makes one a heretic. People feel threatened when one questions their fundamental beliefs. So, how does one question without threatening another? We need to create common ground. The goal of conversation is to separate reality from fantasy. Our common belief, our common ground, is the search for truth and life. That's one thing that you need to establish when you have a conversation, to make sure you have common ground. And the common ground should be truth and life. But what does this mean, truth, and what does life mean? Asking why will connect belief and reality. And I'm just going to throw a picture here. Not yet, I guess. Well, maybe I'll just throw it here. See, in the Matrix, we had the boy, from his perspective, he was able to bend a spoon. And in the Matrix, you can do that in a sense. But it's not real reality, as we learned. It's just a fantasy reality. It's a fantasy reality in the boy's mind and in Neil's mind. A shared fantasy. So they can't really bend a spoon, but this is not a real spoon. This is a bit of a mind bender, but that's the way we look at a lot of things. We have a fake reality and not a real reality, and we think we can do things that we really can't. Because reality is not really there, but we think it's happening. I just thought I'd blow your mind a little bit there, okay? Anyway. Asking why will connect belief and reality. See, some people have a belief and they think it's really happening, but it's not the real reality. And that's what's going on in the movie The Matrix all the time. Some will state that they do not believe. They are realists. They only see facts because of this, everything they say is true, because facts are true. To disagree with them is to argue against the facts. There's lots of different people with all their facts that they say is true, and they find it very hard to understand other people's facts, because their facts say this, and they can't think anyway. It is said that there are lies, damned lies, and then there are statistics. Statistics are facts, presented to state a narrative. What happens in statistics happens with all facts. Facts by themselves do not represent truth. Just because you're saying some kind of fact does not necessarily saying you're representing a truth. In presenting facts, one is one cherry picking, using misleading scales, shifting definitions, or stating correlation is causation. Because these are all interpretations. And that's what you do with facts. Who is the source and what is the context? To state a fact is true is to not understand what a fact is. Without an interpretation, facts have no meaning. Let's look at the definition. Fact. It's a noun. It's knowledge or information based on real occurrences. Knowledge or information. Okay. Something demonstrated to exist or known to have existed. Okay. Based on information or knowledge. Genetic engineering is now a fact. That Chaucer was a real person is an undisputed fact. Okay. A real occurrence, an event. Yeah, okay. But if you use the other two, you really get a paraphrase of the definition is a fact is an interpretation using knowledge to understand an event. Because anytime you start using information and knowledge, you're getting an interpretation there. Am I bending the definition to suit my argument? No. If facts are only an event, then any interpretation of an event is not to be included in the observation, which is obviously not happening in 2 or 1. Here's it just puts the event here by itself in 3. But obviously this is not happening in 1 or 2. It's not only just, it's the facts are interpreted. It's not just an event. For example, the sun appears on the horizon. Current science would state this happens because of Newtonian physics and the orbits of objects in space. Those objects being the planets and so forth. This interpretation, based on knowledge, would not be considered a fact if facts were only an event. Clearly, the given definition would treat Newtonian physics as facts, which it does. Like in the second thing, it says, like genetic engineering is now a fact. This is based on knowledge and interpretation of the world. But in another culture, the sun god moving the sun across the sky would also be considered a fact. For it would also be based on a narrative of knowledge. Some argue that each interpretation is as valid as the other. And this is what we're having today. We may have somebody with this culture of the sun, whatever, and it being as valid as this culture of Newtonian physics. And saying that, and we're having that issue in actually universities right now. Okay. Today's statements, I have my truth and you have your truth. If you look at that, basically the truth is based on the person and authority of the person. So they say, I have my truth and it's based on my authority. And the truth is truth. And that's the way it is. It's really a circular argument because the truth is based on the person and the person is based on the truth. So it's circular. Using it destroys known science and governance. How come? Because that's not the real definition of truth. But what is truth? Is truth a knowledge narrative? Is it, I have my truth and you have your truth? Is it a knowledge narrative? Or is there more to truth than that? Here's what they give for a definition of truth. Truth is a conformity to fact or actuality. Does this story have truth in it? Here we have a story, it's got a narrative. So you're using your truth, which is the narrative, to determine whether the narrative, the story is true. Kind of a little bit of circular logic there. Reality, actuality. Okay. In truth, he was not qualified for the job. Okay, there's narratives, there's, qualifications. What's the narrative for that? What's the job? So forth. Lots of things involved in there. The reality of a situation. The truth is she respects your work. Does truth conform with facts? I've already argued that a fact is a knowledge-interpreted event. Depending on the culture's knowledge, this fact yields a different interpretation of reality. The interpretation confirms the observation, and the observation confirms the interpretation. This is circular reasoning. And if you're into logic, that proves that it's not truth if you have circular reasoning, if they're based on each other. To break out of this recursive crash in logic, the interpretation needs to be questioned for inconsistencies. Yeah, if you use circular reasoning, basically in a computer programming, you will get into this loop and it crash, where you get loops like this. Truth must be defined so that it does not depend on interpretation of cultural knowledge to understand reality. Truth must be defined as to not depend on interpretation of cultural knowledge to understand reality. Said that twice just to sink that in, to let that sink in. The definition of truth needs to be concise rather than vague and convoluted. And that's kind of what the circular reasoning is convoluted and vague. Truth is a search for reality, grounded in three premises. This is what I propose, which makes it more concise than, when you look at truth. Some people talk about pragmatic truth and this and that truth. Those are all knowledge systems that don't really work for finding out what truth is. I mean, the kind of work, but not really. Truth is a search for reality grounded in three premises. Is the proposition consistent? Is it everywhere, omnipresent, and is it eternal? Which, I'll just tell you what this. Omnipresent only means everywhere and does not mean God. Eternal, in the biblical sense, I'm a Christian, means in all ages. Ages are definable. I would call it periods, but really periods is not really a good, but ages are definable. Therefore, an age could be defined as a period without time, space, matter, or energy. I think I'll just take this period out. Anyway, this definition eliminates the argument that one group has their truth versus another knowledge base of truth. For truth, the knowledge base would have to fulfill all premises to be considered. The knowledge base would have to fulfill all premises to be considered a truth statement. So you can make a statement, but if it doesn't have consistency and it is not everywhere and it doesn't go all ages, then it's not truth. It's an opinion or it's your thoughts or whatever, but it's not truth. Okay, what is knowledge? The knowledge is the state or fact of knowing. Humans aspire to knowledge. Familiarity, awareness, or understanding gained through experience or study. So, this is all about interpretation. That's what I wanted to get in here. So knowledge is an interpretation based on experience. So when you throw knowledge in there, all of a sudden you're getting into interpretations. That's just to confirm the other part up there. How does one build their interpretation if they want to build it on truth? They usually build this interpretation on the culture they grew up in. To understand interpretations of events, we must understand our culture. What is our culture? Some will state we have a post-Christian culture, but these only state where our culture has been. They do not state where we are, nor do they state what our culture is transforming into. If our culture were Christian, currently educational institutions do not support the culture that established them. And those currently in charge of these institutions usually do not present the culture they are using to replace their original culture, though some are vaguely aware of it. The deepest they go is to consider it a post-Marxist culture, if they actually consider what they're trying to do. And that they don't really understand what this is, though. The ideology of Marxism and socialism historically dates to people before even the ancient Greeks society. But we only have usually records up to there, but we have other records too. Others have demonstrated, written records, others have demonstrated the historic river of thought leading to Marxism. It is a study, and I will not attempt to explain it here because it'd be long. The Tech History YouTube channel has laid it out, and one can follow its resource path to understand this in history. He has lots of books and so forth, the guy who has this channel, and it's good just to take a dive into that, I would think, if you want to know more about that. It's a good start. But we will not go into that here. We will make the effort to determine what determines our interpretations of facts. I will present my understanding. It's kind of a, without going into all that, I'll just present the end point. I will make some assumptions. I think they are reasonable, but you may not. Disagreement is the nature of the beast we are tackling. I will present an ancient method for interpreting facts. This has been used for a long time, as I mentioned already before. Facts were interpreted using gods. The reason the sun rose in the sky was the sun god. For every event, a god was involved. Understanding nature meant knowing the gods. Our society states that we use reason to understand observations. We state this to mean reason is knowledge above the use of gods. We think the ancients did not use reason because they relied on gods. But they also used reason. Okay, what is reasoning? Reasoning is the process of reasoning involves using culturally established premises to formulate narratives that explains events. Okay, so you always have to have premises to create your reasoning. So depending on your premises to begin with, you get a different narrative. So you're all using reasoning still, but you're just coming to different conclusions because your premises are different and they seem to be justified in working with you in your society. But, they may not be true premises, but they may seem true because you have nothing to really question it with. You don't know how to really search for truth, so you have these premises, okay? So it's very important to establish your premises and use truth to figure out if they're actually good premises. To understand the narratives of the observations, it is necessary to know one's culture and its axioms. Historically, all cultures use gods to formulate their narratives. I believe that even in today's scientific world, we still use gods, but we do not recognize them as gods. Okay, we need to understand the purpose of gods. Gods are used to understand how to relate to the world of the living and the dead, the spiritual and the material. The study of gods is called theology. Once we understand the theology of the gods, we can determine the premises we use to create narratives that helps us understand the world we live in. And there are many gods. I'm a Christian. The Bible states there are many gods. God says there are many gods in the Bible. And, there's one true God, but there's other gods. And the true God, stands on the premises of truth. He's consistent, he's everywhere, and he's in all ages. So I guess, truth is God, is my God anyway. I don't know if it's your God. Okay. To make this discussion clear, I will present two cases of gods in our current society that oppose one another in their theologies, scientific theories, language use, and governance. They oppose in all those cases. The theology used in science becomes apparent when discussing things which are beyond the observable. Once one grasps the concepts, one can find the use of these different gods in other scientific and declarations and fields of knowledge. One God is the Gnostic God. This God is infinite in nature, has no beginning or ending. The universe is a form of this God. Because this God is infinite in nature, logic concludes that this God is the universe. And the universe is infinite. This God, being infinite, concludes that the universe is also infinite, having no beginning or end. However, it may have cycles of expansion and contraction. Theories of multiverses are a derivative, or are derived from this premises of this God. So these are like the beginning of the universe. It's not something you can measure. So people that are using, presenting these multi-universes and some other theories like this are basically showing the God they believe in, which is the Gnostic God, about an infinite God. And basically the universe is infinite, so forth. All are within this God. Therefore, individuality does not exist. We don't really exist. We're just an imagination, basically, of this God. The universe is just the matrix. Okay? It's all just an imagination thing. Nothing has agency. All things are fated. So in this God, all things are fated. And people don't have agency. They just do obey. This narrative on agency has more to do with governance. Okay? You'll see this in different religions and government things. It's a big issue. Okay, now I'm going to present the biblical God. The biblical God defines himself as being at the beginning and at the end of the universe. The universe is finite in duration, and it is not God. This God created the universe at a starting time for a purpose, and this universe has distinct limits declared for all things within it. In governance, this God is limited by words used to create the universe. These words establish the functions and relationships of this God with all things in the universe. The words are the pillars holding up the structure of the universe. So nothing is really, in the Gnostic God, everything is just kind of mashed together into the God. And even the idea of the universe contracting and expanding, at some point it contracts and everything is just becomes the mashed God, the puree of everything, and then it recreates things. Like that's the the Gnostic God. This God does not do that. Everything has their own distinction. This God establishes the existence of all and gives agency and responsibility to the living. Even animals have agency and responsibility. All animals do. Do you think this explanation is valid? Will it help you understand yourself and the world around you? So we have these two gods, and this is something you can see and you can wonder about. After reading this, you will know that I think differently than you do. I'm sure. But hopefully this will equip you with the knowledge to have edifying conversations with me and others who think differently. So that's the end of my talk. I hope that it helped you understand something about the world, how to have conversations, what is going on, and to not get into arguments. I hope that my talk has helped you in all these things. It's I'm very controversial. This is just kind of a summation kind of, but if you start thinking about the issues I'm talking about here, you can see that there's some big issues here. Anyway, I hope that it will help you. May God bless you and give you peace.